Welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show, where you'll learn how to grow your team today. Join Ken Trupke and his guests as they discuss what works and doesn't work to grow your team in today's world. And now, your host, Ken Trupke.
Hello, and welcome again to the Clarity Advisor Show. Accountability often gets a bad rap. But in exit interviews, it's the reason people often give for why they're leaving, the lack of accountability. And done right, accountability brings autonomy, authority, agency, confidence, credibility, return on investment, one of my favorites, and it minimizes all those painful hours of conversations about who's doing what and what is or isn't getting done. So my guest today, Tara Kinney, is a growth strategist. Through Atomic Growth, the company she co-founded, she helps business owners and executives use data to align people and processes to create accountability that people love so we can grow profits. Welcome to the show, Tara Kinney.
Thank you, Ken. It's great to be here.
Well, it is great and glad we could finally pull this off. This is literally our fourth attempt between canceled flights and illness and technical glitches. We just have not been able to pull it off. So here we are. And you are right now in St. Louis, but soon to be in Boston, yes?
Yes, I'm in the middle of a transition, selling in Missouri, buying in Massachusetts, and hopefully moving this summer if all goes as planned.
Okay, well, that's exciting. All right, well, I want to get to accountability. That's the big thing and how we make that a thing that people love. But first, tell us about growth strategist. What is that and how did you get started doing that?
Well, it's really through the school of hard knocks. There's really nothing else that can teach you how to grow companies. All the school books, all the classroom learnings is not practical application. So through the School of Hard Knocks, working with about 70 different companies to date, or before I was 40 anyway. I won't tell you how old I am now. But I saw things that worked, things that didn't work, why strategies failed, why good ideas didn't produce results, why great teams could not keep great people. And it's just inspired me to help grow companies for the benefit of all of the people who work there and that are able to scale and grow to achieve the outcomes that the founders and owners are seeking.
Okay, so as a growth strategist, how do you engage with clients? Do you come in as part of the team or you come in alongside them? Are you coaching just like the leaders or do you get together and coach more of the boots on the ground, frontline type teams, or how does that work?
Yeah. So we dive in and roll up our sleeves. We typically start with some type of a diagnose phase project that's important for bringing together all of the stakeholders. If you don't have all of the different people who will be impacted by change involved in those early stages of discussion, the change will be painful. So in our diagnose process, we accomplish two things. One is hear everybody, allow them to voice their opinion, and start to create buy-in for the change that we're going to recommend. The second part is analysis, where we're looking at what's working, what's not working. And if you were to scale, especially in the area of revenue operations, that's where we work. If you were to scale revenue, scale the number of customers that you serve, where are the bottlenecks and what pieces of your organization are going to start to break down first? If we can plan for how to shore up the infrastructure, it's like making your pipe bigger within your organization so that as you have more customers flowing through, you're able to serve all of those customers and deliver on the promises that were made by marketing and sales to drive the profits that you would actually expect from the higher revenue. Unfortunately, most organizations go into growth thinking marketing and sales, if you go get all of the customers, we can serve them, we'll do what we do, and then our profit projections will pan out. But in general, we haven't truly mapped out how to scale all the parts of our organization that will need to scale in order to succeed at serving more customers.
Okay. And I would imagine that when you're asking that question, hey, if we doubled our business, tripled 5x, whatever the big number is, what breaks? That's going to be a question people haven't really thought about. Do you have some examples of where you've brought that question to the table and some of the different responses you've got from different groups?
Sure. Well, the best thing and most common answer is it'll be fine. If we just get more closed sales, everything will be fine.
Nothing will break. It'll be perfect. Yes.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. So we have a couple of organizations that we've worked with that had that philosophy. If marketing and sales will bring in more customers, bring in more revenue, we will hit our growth targets, our investors will be happy, and we'll scale our organization. And ultimately, two of them ended up going out of business because they were not able to deliver on what had been sold. Therefore, the contracts were canceled, but they had spent the money to start the process of serving the customers, but you didn't deliver what the customer purchased. So they were able to cancel, not pay you. And it ended up driving a couple of them out of business because on the delivery side, they were not able to perform. One of those was not their issue. You know, we just went through a big supply chain issue that was worldwide, and everybody was able to say the supply chain is broken down. That's why I cannot get you the parts you need. That's why I can't deliver what you bought. However, that only works so long. At some point, they're going to say, well, I need my money back then. I'm going to have to do something else.
Sure. Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. So you're in the room asking people, some small group of operations people or whatever it is, and you're saying, hey, if we were to double, what would break? And after you get them past the nothing would break, it'll be fine. You get them to say, no, no, no. Something's going to. We're going to get to a certain size when something gives. I would imagine they're struggling to answer that. How do you prompt them, or do you give them examples, or do you just keep asking it until they get the hang of it? Or how do you get them to get their heads around what would actually break and start having that conversation?
Well, technically, they've hired us to figure out what's going to break. So while we might ask the question, we're asking it of a group of people that are working in the front line, people that are working in management, as well as executives. So we have everyone in the room, and we're talking about it through the lens of buyer experience. So everyone in every organization agrees that without buyers coming in the door, making the purchase, receiving what they bought, enjoying it so they buy more, and then referring more customers to you, you will go out of business. So we have a group of people who might not agree on how to do it, but they do agree that this buyer journey is important. And so we walk through the buyer journey and ask them about all of the handoffs. When does the contract go to legal from sales? How does it get to sales from marketing? After the contract signed, how does it go into onboarding and delivery? What are your account management practices? How do you serve them? And so instead of asking them what will break, we just ask them what they do. And through the course of this questioning, they identify where their gaps are, because when they don't have an answer, we probe more and we dig deeper into that area and we identify the holes in their bucket. So if you put more customers in, these are all of the places where your revenue and profit are going to leak out. So we need to shore those up before you try to grow. So it's not about them answering what's going to break when they scale. It's about us knowing what questions to ask of their group so that they have all identified together the pain points of growth. And then our job at Atomic Revenue is to prioritize the recommendations. So 15 or 20 opportunities for revenue operations are identified. What order do they need to be addressed in to grow the company? Because there are some that you have to make more revenue in order to afford fixing those larger investment opportunities. So many organizations get their priorities in the wrong order, and it shows up as we've tried lead generation 5 times. We're on our 4th agency. And we just aren't able to grow sales. Or it shows up as, we have not been able to hire a good salesperson. We've had 13 salespeople in the last 7 years, and we cannot get a salesperson who can sell anything. If you ask a founder, owner, or a technical team, it's never the product. It's never the way they do business. That's not why a salesperson can't sell. It is 100% the salesperson exclusively. So we're able to take a more objective look at how the customer experiences purchasing from a business and take out any of the attachment to past ideas, strategies, investments that have been made by focusing on the customer so that everyone is in agreement about providing the customer experience at a higher volume or at scale.
Okay. I love the process focus on that. I tend to be a process thinker. And so just to approach this from, let's map out that buyer journey and then see where there might be some gaps. I can see where that would be really powerful to get the team on the same page. I always like to be able to draw something or get something on paper that we can all look at, so we're on the same side of the table, figuratively, looking at the problem instead of on opposite sides of the table pointing at each other. Like you point out, the idea of it's the salespeople's fault, they can't sell our product. Well, why don't we map the process and get on the same side of the table and look at the process, and maybe there's a problem in there. All right, well, this is good stuff. I want to get to accountability and how to make a culture that embraces and loves it. We will get to that on the other side of the break, so stay with us. We're with Tara Kinney today on the Clarity Advisor Show.
Is your business where you want it to be or on track to get there? Clarity Advisors helps business leaders improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success. We specialize in helping you streamline your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Call or text Ken at 616-822-2998 to have a complimentary 12-minute call to see what some clarity could do for you.
Okay, welcome back to the Clarity Advisor Show. Today we're talking with growth strategist Tara Kinney. And Tara, I want to get into accountability. So I guess the opening question is, how does someone who's growth focused and creative get into something that's so measurable and metric driven as accountability?
So I am very passionate about the people who are impacted by business. All of the people who work in the business, the customers of the business, the vendors who support the business. And I have seen so much in my experience where a group of leaders is seeking accountability for team members, vendors, whoever they're spending money on within their organization. And they think these people are just not accountable. I cannot rely on them to achieve the outcomes they've been hired to deliver. And if you take those people out of the room and then you talk to the vendors, employees, and other people who are in their roles trying to be accountable, you see the chasm that exists between the two perspectives. Even today at lunch, it was a great example. A VP got her review from her supervisor, and it had nothing to do with the measurability of the outcomes of her work. As a matter of fact, all of the words in the review were opinions. That if you asked 5 different people, they would describe it in slightly different words that all have very different implications. None of it was related to the measurable outcomes associated with her role. And she asked me, because it happened yesterday, what would you do in this situation? I'm trying to drive meaningful outcomes. I feel I've been hired to drive outcomes. And I just received my performance review, and it's all opinions about whether or not I'm too assertive or abrupt in my communications. So I encouraged her to try to turn it back to outcomes. And I asked her, what are you accountable for? What's the measurable KPI associated with your role? And she said, well, it's 3-year average profit. But when I look at the drivers of profit and the percent of the budget, she was really, I only make decisions about less than 5% of the total budget that impacts profit. But
Wow.
I'm accountable to profit of the division of the company that I manage. And so I had to immediately step on my grandstand and be like, you are actually not accountable for that number at all. You have zero control over that number. And if the leadership team hires someone, anyone in any role to produce an outcome, but does not give them the ability to make decisions that impact that outcome, they're not accountable for it. The leaders, their supervisors, hold all of the accountability because they hold all the decision-making power to drive that number.
So it's the authority that's critical to have the accountability. Am I hearing you right?
You have to be able to measure it, and you have to be able to make decisions to improve it. So if you don't have access to the information that tells you where it is and what factors change it, and you don't have the ability to adjust the factors that impact it, you are not accountable. 100%. And everyone's going to say, no, I hired you to be accountable for this. Did you see your job description? These are the measurables that you're accountable for. As a matter of fact, I can use a really great marketing agency example. I get hired to select a lot of marketing agencies on behalf of companies, as well as fire a lot of marketing agencies, only because I'm able to look at utilization of budget and then accountability for performance through this same lens that we're talking about. And we were hired to determine why the fourth agency that this company had hired was not producing leads to grow the business. And we went through that process that I described previously in the podcast, and everybody was resisting the process. Our problem is lead generation. If we just had more leads, we would close more sales. And we hired this company to produce leads, but we are not closing more sales. And through the analysis, we determined that the company hired the agency to manage and deliver on trade shows and inbound digital leads. And the company was pursuing enterprise and mid-level clients. When we did the customer analysis, 93% of their budget, including 100% of the agency, was spent on trade show and inbound, and they never once received a single lead for enterprise or mid-market clients from either of those efforts. Yet that is the scope of work given to the agency. That is what the agency was responsible for. And the company continues to hire and fire agencies to deliver a marketing strategy that does not talk to the right customers.
So that just sounds like a mess. So how do you start unwinding that? How do you start untangling that knot and helping the people that can make the changes see what needs to change so that we can improve this? How do you do that?
So usually we have to do some deep dive analysis on some different numbers, looking at which customers are profitable, which customers are lowest cost of sale and highest profit to serve. And we try to find that ideal sweet spot of customers. Then we look at how are you acquiring the customers and which customers are coming in through which channels. So this goes into the technology side of what Atomic Revenue does. We audit a lot of tech stacks, and we help companies try to determine how they are able to measure the things that I'm talking about right now. In this particular case, the company was very measured. They had a lot of technology in place. As a matter of fact, they had 401 KPIs. That's how they knew lead generation was their problem. However, they did not have customer segmentation in their marketing process. So 200, 300 or more leads would go into sales from marketing, but there was no communication feedback loop to let marketing know whether or not those leads or customers were good for sales. And once they went into the sales process, there was no more source tracking. So at that point, we didn't know where the good customers came from. So there was a lot of analysis and digging into Salesforce and Pardot, trying to figure out what the best sources of opportunities were. I think the biggest thing that we uncovered, though, the biggest blind spot was in 401 KPIs. Everybody had numbers that they were responsible for, but no one understood them. They were assigned them as part of their job. They did not know how to impact the numbers, and they were not accountable to the results of the numbers, which resulted in a whole lot of measurability and tracking that managers are watching, but no one accountable for anything, including the fact that 47% of signed applications and contracts to this company were never onboarded. So 47% of what they called closed sales never went through the customer service onboarding process and therefore never spent a dollar with them. So when we're talking about we're brought in because lead generation is the problem, we know lead generation is the problem, and no agency that we hire is accountable for producing the results that we're seeking as an organization. We found accountability as the issue across the board. There was no accountability for the handoff between sales and onboarding to assure that 100% of the customers who signed contracts with you were actually onboarded.
So this sounds like a great exercise in frustration and finger pointing and hand wringing. How do you turn that into something that's fun and enjoyable and start creating the things we talked about, the autonomy and the return on investment and the confidence and all the positives? How do you take this situation and turn it around and get people excited and positive?
So one of the biggest things being an outside consultant that I think is important is positioning yourself as of service to all of the people. Our job is not to find out what you are doing wrong. Our job is to make this company work so that you are able to perform your job, the job that you want to do. So you are able to make decisions and drive change and improve results and improve your job. That's the message that we're giving to the frontline workers, the person in the call center, the person writing the mail campaign. Our job is not to critique your work. Our job is to identify the ways in which you get to deliver your expertise and drive more value for your job and for the organization and be elevated in your capacity. Of course, they think that's great. And all of their managers are sweating. Like, oh man, you can't let that person make a decision. They don't know what decision to make if I don't tell them what to do. So on the management side, then we are of service to you as the managers, because if your people have access to the data and understand the measurable outcomes of their role and the impact of their job on organizational growth, on the other departments in the company, if they can see that and they are actually accountable for it, your job as a manager gets a lot easier. All that babysitting, crying, whining that you deal with right now, or people bringing things to you that you don't know if you should invest in them or listen to those ideas or not. All of that goes away if you and your team have visibility and the authority to drive change within your individual unit based on the value it brings to the organization as a whole. And that comes down to 100% data, technology, and process that empower people to succeed in a growing company. So I think lots of times people come and they say, hey, we want accountability. We need some data. We need some KPIs so that we can hold people accountable. But when you come to atomic revenue, you're not going to get KPIs to hold people accountable. You're going to get KPIs so that people can be accountable, not held accountable, that they can be accountable.
Okay. So tell me that either you're still in process moving this one example forward, or that there was a happy ending and people are now living their best lives because the KPIs are cleaned up and the accountability chain is clear and the managers are buying into all this. How did this story end, or is it still going?
So we do screen the companies we work with pretty well, and we do a lot of change management with them. So the leaders were bought in. A lot of really, really great people work at the company who wanted to do a good job. And if you have people who want to do a good job, which I will tell you is most of the population, they are not showing up to work just to collect a paycheck. They want to do a good job. So if you
Absolutely.
have people on your team that are normal humans wanting to do a good job, and you have leaders who are open-minded and seeking answers to how to make their jobs easier, how to make the organization better, and they're going to reap the rewards. The consultant doesn't reap the rewards. They will benefit. If you have those two factors in place, you can manage the change. And as a result, this company was able to move forward. They were part of a larger organization, and they were able to take some of the best practices from their team to other divisions of the company. And they were also able to adopt some best practices from other divisions of their organization to this group that we were working with, especially in the areas of onboarding. If it's a blind spot, no one knows it's there. Once you know that it's there and everyone is aligned to achieve the outcomes together, because we've all agreed on it together, then we can start to find answers. And so they found the answers themselves. They were able to solve the problem as soon as it was apparent to them. And they were able to grow. Now, unfortunately, this company hit a major issue during the pandemic because they served the hospitality and restaurant industry. However, they are thriving again now. So they did not go under despite 100% of their customers being in the most challenged industries during the pandemic. So sometimes that's what you have to hope for because, well, until recently, we didn't actually think that the pandemic situation was possible. So companies that were not well structured, were not well organized, did not know where to cut budgets, did not know how to control their costs during the pandemic. And as a result, they may have cut the wrong costs and gone out of business in the same types of industries.
Yeah, that's so interesting, and I'm glad to hear it was a happy ending, and it's awesome that they were able to kind of cross pollinate across divisions and bring what they learned with you to other places, and then bring back some other things that other people had learned. So I love those kind of stories where people become open to the idea of, oh, if we share good practices, that we all get better, and when we all get better, kind of all boats rise with the tide, and that helps the business. So yeah, well done. Listen, I know you're a reader. What books are you reading these days, or podcasts are you listening to? And specifically around growth, what would be some good books you might recommend for the audience?
So I am biased to Atomic Habits, not just because Atomic Revenue and Atomic Habits seem like they should go together, but it really is all of the little things that make the big things matter. And so many organizations are just focused on the big things that they don't fix the small things that are the incremental changes that produce exponential growth. So Atomic Habits for sure. I am currently reading Untangled, which I've got right here, which was recommended to me by a colleague because I am a mother of a teenage and a 10-year-old daughter, two daughters. They said, you have to read this book. So I'm hoping to get more in touch with my mothering and daughter management skills here as we go into this critical age. So fingers crossed on that one. I don't know. And then I actually just finished up. So my favorite genre to read is actually historical fiction. I do think that we can all learn a lot from history. So I do like to read about everyday people in historical life. The thing that I always come back to is that every single person for history, forever, today and for always, every single person plays an important role in making our society work. And they need to be respected and elevated and accountable and appreciated for what they do, even if it's a job that I don't want to do and I can never see myself doing that. I am sure grateful that someone else is, that is what someone else does. And so I appreciate the historical fiction for continuing to feed that side of my soul that is appreciative of all of the people and the unseen people within organizations and society in general.
Yeah, that's terrific. I'm a big fan of historical fiction as well. I think it's always interesting to see that everybody faces challenges, even great famous people that you thought like, oh no, their life was up and to the right the whole time. No, actually they had all kinds of setbacks. So listen, Tara, I know you do some speaking as well as the work through Atomic Growth. So who would be a good person to reach out to you, and what would be the best way to do that?
So I normally speak to CEO, key executive, and leadership groups, largely on topics of measurability and accountability. So anyone who is looking for a speaker to come in and bring a different perspective to that conversation, especially in the area of digital transformation and organizations that are trying to master the art of measurability. So, in addition to anyone who's seeking a speaker for that type of audience, we serve CEOs and executives in the B2B market space who typically have long sales cycles, high lifetime value customers, and are typically in technology, commercial services, anything that's more of a consultative, complex sales process. Mm-hmm. That's our niche at Atomic Revenue. So many organizations need some help scaling their sales teams or getting their tech stacks under control as they grow. And those are all of the things that we love to do in revenue operations and revenue enablement. So anybody can go to atomicrevenue.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Tara J. Kinney. That is my #1 social platform. I know there are others. I like LinkedIn. I think I've been on it since like the early days, definitely in my early 20s. And it's really great to see how everyone's career has progressed, and I love to stay in touch with the people I meet on my journey.
That's great. And we'll have links to your LinkedIn and Atomic Revenue in the show notes. We'll also have those book recommendations in the show notes as well. This has been such a pleasure. I appreciate all your insights. This is one people are going to have to go back and listen to again to make sure they get all the notes and nuggets. Love the balance between the process and the technology and operations along with the people. You've got such a heart for people and wanting them to succeed and wanting the tools to be in service of people so that we can achieve more as people, not people in service of tools, which sometimes we see. So again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. It was great to be here. And anybody who feels like they have questions after the podcast and doesn't want to listen to it again, they can just send me a message on LinkedIn. I always have conversations with people about these topics because I love it and I love to help people.
Okay, and that brings us to the end of another Clarity Advisor show. We appreciate your time today and hope you get a lot out of that podcast. And we look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you so much.
Listening to the Clarity Advisor show. Clarity Advisors is a speaking, training, and consulting firm specializing in helping you simplify your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Connect with Clarity Advisors today to learn more about how they can help you improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success.